The land now known as Zambia has a rich and complex history stretching back centuries. Long before the arrival of Europeans, various powerful empires and kingdoms left their mark on the region. The Shona people, migrating from the north, established a presence as early as the 12th century, their influence intertwined with the legendary Main Mutapa Empire. This powerful kingdom, renowned for its gold trade, extended its reach across parts of southern Zambia, leaving behind a legacy of artistry and trade that would long outlive its reign. As centuries passed, new waves of migration brought other groups to the region. The Luba and Lunda peoples, originating from the Luba heartland in present-day Democratic Republic of Congo, carved out their own spheres of influence. These kingdoms, while smaller in scale than the Mwene Mutapa, were nonetheless sophisticated, engaging in intricate trade networks and developing complex social structures that would shape the cultural tapestry of the region. The arrival of Portuguese explorers in the late 18th century marked a turning point, ushering in an era of exploration and, ultimately, exploitation that would forever alter the destiny of Zambia. The Portuguese, driven by a thirst for gold and ivory, ventured into the interior, encountering the indigenous populations and establishing tentative trade relations. However, their presence, though initially limited, sowed the seeds for more profound changes to come. The 19th century brought fresh waves of upheaval as the destabilizing forces of migration and the slave trade swept across the region. Traditional power structures were challenged and communities grappled with the growing influence of outsiders. It was during this turbulent period that a pivotal figure emerged on the Zambian stage. In 1851, the famed Scottish missionary and explorer David Livingstone embarked on his epic journey through the African interior, eventually reaching the awe-inspiring Victoria Falls, which he named after Queen Victoria. Livingstone's explorations, chronicled in his detailed journals and captivating lectures, brought the wonders and the plight of the region to the attention of the Western world. His accounts of the slave trade's brutality further fueled abolitionist movements and set the stage for greater European engagement in the region, though not always with benevolent intentions.
Livingstone's explorations, while driven by a complex mix of motivations, unwittingly paved the way for a new era of European intrusion into the heart of Africa. Lured by the continent's vast resources and driven by imperial ambitions, European powers scrambled to assert their dominance, culminating in the infamous Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885. This event, where European nations carved up Africa among themselves with callous disregard for existing boundaries or the aspirations of its people, marked a turning point in Zambia's history. The territory that would become Zambia fell under the control of the British South Africa Company, a chartered company founded by Cecil Rhodes, a man driven by a vision of British dominion stretching from Cape to Cairo. Rhodes, a staunch imperialist, viewed the region primarily as a source of mineral wealth and a stepping stone in his grand scheme. The Biasak, armed with a royal charter granting it sweeping powers, wasted no time in establishing its authority, often resorting to force to quell resistance from indigenous populations. The company's rule was characterized by exploitation, with African labor and resources siphoned off to fuel British industries and line the pockets of shareholders. The discovery of vast copper deposits in the late 1920s transformed the region's economic landscape, but not necessarily to the benefit of its indigenous inhabitants. The copper boom attracted a wave of European settlers and investors, further marginalizing the African population and relegating them to the fringes of the burgeoning mining industry. In 1924, the British government took over direct control of the territory, designating it as Northern Rhodesia, a name that reflected its colonial status. Despite this change in administration, the underlying system of racial segregation and economic inequality persisted. Africans were denied basic rights, subjected to discriminatory laws, and excluded from positions of power. The seeds of resentment were sown, and a growing sense of nationalism began to take root, fueled by the injustices of colonial rule. The discovery of copper, while a boon for the colonial economy, had profound and lasting impacts on Zambia's social and political fabric. The mines acted as magnets, drawing in people from across the region and beyond, transforming once disparate communities into a nascent nation, bound together by shared experiences of hardship and exploitation. The influx of migrant laborers from neighboring countries seeking work in the mines altered the demographic landscape, creating a melting pot of cultures and languages that would shape Zambia's national identity. However, this unity came at a price. Working conditions in the mines were notoriously harsh and dangerous. Africans, relegated to the most menial and hazardous tasks, faced constant discrimination, enduring low wages, inadequate housing, and limited access to healthcare and education. The colonial administration, while reaping the benefits of the copper boom, did little to improve the lot of the African workforce. This disparity, stark and undeniable, fueled resentment and sowed the seeds of resistance. The mines, however, were not merely sites of oppression, they also became crucibles of political consciousness. African workers, thrown together in close quarters, began to share their grievances, forging bonds of solidarity that transcended ethnic and linguistic barriers. Trade unions, though initially suppressed by the colonial authorities, emerged as powerful vehicles for articulating workers' demands for better wages, improved working conditions, and an end to discriminatory practices. The struggle for workers' rights became increasingly intertwined with the burgeoning movement for political independence. African leaders, many of whom had first-hand experience of the harsh realities of life in the mines, recognized the need to dismantle the entire system of colonial rule to achieve true liberation. The mines, once symbols of oppression, became unlikely catalysts for change, forging a new national consciousness and laying the groundwork for the struggle for independence. Section 4. The struggle for self-determination. The winds of change blowing across Africa in the post-World War II era carried with them the potent seeds of nationalism and self-determination. The war, with its stark exposure of European hypocrisy and the sacrifices made by African soldiers fighting for freedom abroad, had irrevocably shattered the myth of European superiority. Across the continent, colonies were demanding independence, emboldened by the weakening grip of European powers preoccupied with their own post-war reconstruction. In northern Rhodesia, too, the struggle for independence gained momentum. African political consciousness, nurtured in the mines and townships, found expression in the emergence of nationalist movements. Leaders like Harry Nkumbula, founder of the Northern Rhodesia African National Congress, and Kenneth Kaunda, a charismatic schoolteacher drawn into the maelstrom of nationalist politics, emerged as powerful voices for change. These leaders, drawing inspiration from Pan-Africanist ideals and the successes of independence movements elsewhere, mobilized the masses, demanding an end to colonial rule and the establishment of a free and independent Zambia. The colonial authorities, initially dismissive of these demands, responded with a mix of repression and reluctant reforms. Nationalist leaders were harassed, imprisoned, and their movements banned. However, the tide of history was against them. The British government, recognizing the inevitability of decolonization, began to explore avenues for a peaceful transition to majority rule. However, the path to independence was not to be smooth. The creation of the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland in 1953, a doomed attempt to preserve white minority rule by linking northern Rhodesia with southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and Nyasaland, now Malawi, only served to further inflame nationalist sentiments. Africans, recognizing this maneuver for what it was, intensified their struggle, demanding the Federation's dissolution and the establishment of majority rule. Section 5. Dawn of Independence, Kaunda's Vision. The year 1964 marked a pivotal moment in Zambia's history, a year etched in the annals of the nation's memory as the year of liberation. On October 24th, after years of struggle and sacrifice, Northern Rhodesia shed the shackles of colonial rule and emerged on the world stage as the Republic of Zambia, a nation reborn with a new name reflecting its newfound freedom. Kenneth Kaunda, the charismatic leader of the United National Independence Party, or UNIP, stood at the helm, becoming Zambia's first president, his face beaming with pride as he hoisted the newly designed Zambian flag, a symbol of hope and unity for a nation yearning for a brighter future. Kaunda, a visionary leader, outlined a path for Zambia rooted in principles of humanism, social justice, and national unity. He envisioned a Zambia where tribe and ethnicity would take a backseat to national identity, where the wealth of the nation would be shared equitably among its citizens, and where education and healthcare would be accessible to all. His charisma and eloquence resonated with the masses, inspiring hope for a break from the inequalities of the past. The early years of independence were marked by a wave of optimism and nation-building fervor. Kaunda's government embarked on an ambitious program of social and economic reforms, investing heavily in education, healthcare, and infrastructure development. Schools and hospitals were built, roads and bridges constructed, and efforts were made to diversify the economy away from its reliance on copper. However, the challenges facing the newly independent nation were immense. Zambia, like many other newly independent African nations, inherited a legacy of colonialism that had left its economy underdeveloped, its social fabric strained, and its political institutions fragile. The task of building a new nation from the ashes of colonial rule was daunting, and the road ahead was fraught with obstacles.